Hey everyone, today we are here for JavaScript Breakpoint. I think it's our fourth one so far. We're getting enough that I think it's going to be better to think about these in terms of months. So it's July's episode today. Yesterday or last month we were missing Xandor. This month we were missing Skulk. I think we're all super excited for him. Big congratulations. He's recently had the birth of his second child. So super excited that he's not here today. But yeah, we still have the crew here, and I am excited for us to kick off about what's new in JavaScript over the last month. I think we're going to follow the same approach we did last month and do a high-level overview of what all we're going to discuss, and then we can dive into some of the details. So we have a list prepared. Ben and Xandor are their overachieving selves, and they've got a whole bunch of things in store for us. Who wants to kick things off? I know, Ben, you were excited about a few things.
Well, we can say excited, or we can say I have some things to discuss. There's one or two things in the list I'm excited about. I think this was a reasonably quiet month for JavaScript. Some interesting things happened. Just for some viewers, last month we didn't touch on the ES 2023 release because we discussed that in the first episode. So we might discuss it a little bit today if we run out of topics, but the things I'd like to cover today are Svelt's new website and Svelte 4. We discussed Svelte 4 last time, but we didn't discuss how schlick the new website is. Prettier 3.0. I'll just go a little bit slower so Mike can do his thing. Prettier 3.0 and drama around common JS and ECMAScript models. Then we have the optional chaining assignment proposal is in stage 1 now, and that's something that some people might be looking forward to, I guess. Additionally, NPM will now check package provenance on commits, or will link you to the commit in the repo with package provenance and warn you about stuff. It's, I guess, a step in the right direction. I've pasted that link for you as well. Right. Then GitHub is doing, it's not really a JavaScript thing, but GitHub is doing passkeys, and Xandor has some thoughts there. Then there's a pretty cool article I read this month on the GitHub README project called TypeScript and the Dawn of Gradual Types. Well researched, well presented. I really like the effort the README team puts into like making each one of the posts look and feel like its own unique thing. Then there's the promise with resolvers proposal, which was initially lukewarm on, but I'm feeling more and more like it's definitely a step in the right direction. And then there was a Hacker News discussion about JavaScript frameworks, and people got angry. Who would have predicted that? Let me link to the conversation on HN. But there were some interesting points made there, and I think it's worth going over and praising React for bringing sanity to Flame Wars. That's it from my side. Xandor?
I've been deep in the weeds in the project at the moment, and I don't have much about new stuff in JavaScript, but I discovered this week that you can customize how an object is displayed in the console log. In Chrome and Firefox and Blink-based browsers. I couldn't find anything on Safari, and I don't run a Mac, so I wasn't able to check. But it just kind of amazed me and blew my mind. And if
Maybe also
and show that off.
maybe also talk about like how errors and consoles play together. I know that gave you some extra gray hairs
learn some
over
things.
the last 2 weeks. Yeah, that might be worth discussing.
Awesome, that's pretty exciting. Okay, so out of the bunch, is there anything that we'd like to kick off on? I think the optional chaining assignment is really interesting, and I think that's one that's pretty simple to explain. So maybe we can start with that.
Yeah. So we already have question mark equals to assign to a variable if it's not already assigned. But what the optional chaining assignment does is its syntax is basically object dot question mark dot attribute equals. Yeah, like Mike's typing out there. If A is defined, it will set B. If A is not defined, it'll just skip the statement. Now, like, this is a reasonably common thing. I think on the discussion, the TC39 discussion, there was some questions about like, well, what if we want to make A then become defined once we do this thing? And syntax around that. So but they decided against that eventually. If I'm not mistaken, I'd need to read through the history again and go check the minutes. But it's a useful feature. I think lots of people are going to use it. I don't know how long it's going to take for TypeScript to be able to support it, because I don't really see how TypeScript could support it, because it makes a thing that is not there after. So interesting to see what the TypeScript team is going to do about it. It's stage 1, I think.
Awesome. Okay, sick. Great, yeah. Xander's actually just mentioned another Svelt thing, and this was something that was really interesting to me. I completely forgot about this, but this was a great discussion. Ben, did you come across Rich Harris's post around what Svelt is? Really interesting one. Xander, you've pasted it, so how's about you tell us a little bit about it and get us onto the same page?
All right. So Richard Harris wrote. It's not really hard to call this a blog post, because this was something.
It's a living document, right?
It's like it's a gist basically, right? So here is his little gist. The truth about Svelte. He's like, hey, I told you Svelte was a UI framework. Actually, it's a language, right? And it's interesting because this was my first reaction to V1 of Svelte. I was like, guys, it's not JavaScript semantics. It's almost 100% like JavaScript semantics, except for in a few cases, right? Except for in a few cases, and it's interesting because, and this was before Svelte had like built up a bit of a reputation and gone through more versions and gotten a track record. What I was reminded of was Angular 1's like filter syntax and that kind of thing, which was like almost JavaScript, except when it wasn't. And having said that, look, to be clear, I have no direct experience with Svelte beyond like the Hello World toy examples and that kind of thing. So it's hard to make a value judgment about this. now that he's acknowledged that it's actually a language, right? Because before that, it was kind of like, oh, just write JavaScript, but it's actually not just JavaScript. It's got different semantics, right? And as a result, like that has implications that aren't necessarily all that obvious right now, right? Like in terms of going into the future, like what does that mean? How are they going to keep up with JavaScript? Does their compiler want to keep feature parity with all the new stuff in JavaScript or not? How does that impact like TypeScript integration and so much?
It's also
So it's
really interesting in
where that's
terms
gonna
of
go.
the abstraction. Like a criticism that I hear people talk about with Svelte is you don't really know what's happening under the hood. And particularly when it comes to more complex state issues, sometimes they can be a little bit tricky to debug. If you think of something like state in React, kind of straightforward. Whereas that abstraction is a lot stronger in Svelte. But I think thinking of it of a language, like purely from a semantic perspective, for me it kind of gives it that freedom. You know, with a language you don't want to be concerned about the underlying implementation. You just want to use it to be productive. And I think that was something that was really interesting about what he wrote there. Is he said it's essentially a way to handle reactivity. And thinking of it as a mechanism for that makes a lot of sense. And it also, for me, it helped understand how Svelte came to be around, like the value set when working on it.
Mm-hmm.
So the other interesting thing here is like by finally going, this is, you know what, it's just the language and optimizing compiler. We can finally start having the discussion about like what's not great about optimizing compilers, in that they aren't always super deterministic. So anyone who's worked with C++ enough
Or SQL.
and knows the pain of having to like drop down to assembly because you want to use a move instead of a copy here, and the damn thing just doesn't want to because you put a semicolon somewhere else. That's the pain with optimizing compilers. And like, as excited as I am for React Forget to become a thing, that's probably why it hasn't been released yet, is because like writing deterministic, or rather idempotent is probably a better word to use, optimizing compilers is incredibly hard. And their behavior can be incredibly obtuse because it's also a long tail problem, right? An optimizing compiler. It will forever grow.
So it's interesting because I personally think it's a bit easier to do this kind of stuff for pure functional programming languages because you have more constraints and it's easier to reason about things. But even there, like it gets really hard to reason about what Haskell is going to actually do at runtime. Part of that is because it's lazy, though. But it basically like makes decisions about what to do. And because that as well is very declarative in that you kind of don't know what's necessarily going on under the hood. You just told it what you want, not really exactly how to do it.
And also, there's not a DOM that you have to deal with, which is its own thing.
Well, yeah, in Svelte's case, that is indeed the case. But look, I think having said that, like even in C and C++, like, and this blew my mind when I first read about it. You can have a very different performance characteristics depending on the memory layout that actually ends up happening. And that memory layout can be quite different depending on even the environment variables that have been declared when the program runs. So something like running the program under a different user, which would change the home environment variable by like a character possibly, will like change the memory layout and like change the performance characteristics of some part of your code as a result. So there's like gremlins everywhere. But I think, at least in the case of C++, I think, and C, we've all kind of agreed as an industry that in the long run, that's worth it to not have to write everything in assembly.
For
So-
for like
but it's a trade-off,
some
right?
some reason, the only thing that comes up into my mind with this conversation is like this picture of an O'Reilly book that's called The Joy of LLVM, with like an otter breaking a shell on its belly as the cover. Yeah. What's our next topic? Mike, you muted yourself.
I think we can chat maybe about Prettier. That's a fairly quick one. I'm not sure if anyone's gone through the changes, but I took a quick skim over them and they didn't seem too drastic. Ben?
Yeah, well, prettier can't move the bar too much because it is the bar. Unfortunately, there was much drama over like how they announced the privacy of ES modules for this release. And it sparked conversation about CommonJS, and I did not have the energy to engage with any of it, so I don't really know what the drama was about. Like my suspicion is the drama was about CommonJS is keeping us. Oh, look at that! it's holding us back.
What's really
Because
interesting as well is this was just an opportunity for Bun and Dino to we disagree with that. So there is a counter argument from Bun saying CommonJS is necessary, it's requisite, and it's what the world runs on.
Well, it's just iffies all the way down. Yeah, I need to probably go read that document, but I really just haven't had the energy to. Because you know what, like as a author of some modules and as CTO of a company that is going to be authoring a significant amount of modules, the amount of fear, uncertainty, doubt, and pain I have around having to ship to these different module targets and runtimes as well is significant. And like I don't see for like the next 5 or 6 years. Maybe this ties into the next conversation, the one about the Hacker News thread about why there isn't a lot of Hacker News postings anymore on new JavaScript frameworks and things. And I think a point to be made there is, well, you have to target 4 runtimes and 6 module formats or whatever. It's insane. We need a compiler, one that optimizes for runtimes and targets. Maybe there's a thing. Maybe who did ES Build? What's his name again? I think also Rich.
Yeah. Yes, but he doesn't he
What?
specifically is like, I am not trying to be all things to all people. I have like a very well scoped goal to keep the performance high, kind of thing.
Evan, it's Evan, I think.
Yeah.
Wallace.
Evan Wallace. Evan, please make a thing. Please make a thing that makes me not have to worry about which runtime I'm targeting. I just like, actually, if there's someone who has an answer for, I want to write TypeScript and then run a single command, and it needs to package and publish to registries for Bun, Dino, and Node. and it needs to transpile the JavaScript and set up like my CommonJS, MD, and ESM stuff. And I just want a single convention over configuration command to run. If that already exists, email me. If that
Didn't
doesn't
Jared
already
Palmer
exist,
do something like this?
I don't know.
Have you checked out DNT? That's N for Nelly. I don't know. It does exactly what you need. Dino, npm, ESM, CommonJS, TypeScript declaration. I did send it to Andrew a couple of weeks ago. But
so
essentially, you start from Dino and then you publish to npm. But actually, I'll just throw it in this FigJam, seeing as we're talking about it.
okay,
There's also so Jared Palmer has this thing called TSDX.
oh, TSDX was deprecated many years ago.
Was it?
Yeah, because in favor of he started working on Turbo Repo, I think.
Oh,
Yeah, no, he did.
last
he
commits
did.
in 2022.
Well, I mean, is that
In
Yeah.
JS land,
So-
that's a
That is
lifetime.
ages. That
So
is
anyway,
ages.
like I'd be willing to pay someone to do this for us. Like if you want to work on that, email me and there might be a job for you. The caveat is like you have to have some experience doing this already and have a plan. It's not a figure it out. Some figuring out encouraged, but we need to have some experience and a plan. Email me, you might have a job.
Okay, cool. Let's chat about the promise with resolvers. That sounded quite interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So the problem with the current promise constructor, if you're like trying to take a callbacky thing and make it a promisey thing, is the constructor as its first argument takes a callback that provides you with the resolver and the rejector, and I think eventually when cancellation becomes a thing, a canceling thing. But it's inside that closure. So you're pretty constrained as to if you have like two things that can resolve the same promise, for example, it becomes quite difficult to actually do it with the current interface. So what promise with resolvers does is you call promise with resolvers and it returns a promise object that has the resolver rejector and a third thing. What's the third thing? I can never remember. The promise itself resolve and reject in an object. And then you can use those references wherever you want. You can pass them around and go crazy. I think it's it feels less ergonomic, but I think from a composition perspective, it's going to be a vastly superior to the current constructor.
Okay, awesome. I'm gonna see if I can grab a little snippet as an example here. This is actually pretty. I get what you mean in the sense that it looks less ergonomic, but it seems a lot more powerful. I think that's really it here. Okay, awesome. Cool. Package provenance. That's something that we never had the chance to discuss. I think in our second chat, we brushed over it. It seems this has grown a little bit into something that is even.
Yeah. So basically, if there's an npm module, you can enable provenance, and what provenance does is it ties the published package. Say that 3 times fast. The published package to source on a Git repo somewhere, and it needs to. I think it needs to be a signed commit as well. And it'll warn you, like if provenance is enabled, it'll warn you that, hey, this code does not match what's in the package. So it's just a neato security feature, and can make you feel a little bit more confident about packages that have provenance enabled.
Yeah, awesome. And then we are on to what is essentially our last topic of the day, the lack of fresh JavaScript frameworks, which I think is a fascinating one. Have we reached the critical point, or the tipping point of JavaScript frameworks? Because like, if we look back maybe like 2 years ago, there was all the remix hype, there was all the solid hype. Svelte was, I mean, it wasn't young, but it was making really big waves out of comparatively nowhere. And I'm sure there's others that I've forgotten. Oh yeah, there's like Mithril, Lit. There was a whole onslaught of JS frameworks that came out around 2 years ago. And things have slowed down massively. Like, I mean, we've got HTMX. I'm not sure what we'd call that within the space though. But yeah, like there's Alpine, but that's also kind of old. There's a whole bunch of things, and I haven't seen much
making
new.
some WAVs.
Mm.
So my perspective on this is some of these frameworks are now getting VC funding to the tune of hundreds of millions of US dollars. If you look at, for example, Next and Remix, right? They have teams of people that are employed full time to work on this stuff. Like at some point, developer in their closet writing their framework over the weekend just isn't going to be able to compete with that anymore. Because not only are there engineers working on creating great developer experiences, there's marketing teams driving the adoption, and community managers managing communities, and educational institutions trying to cash in, and creating courses, and corporate drones trying to not get fired for choosing IBM. So it's a lot harder to compete now. You can't just take 2 weeks and write a thing and release it and it's great and it's a step forward anymore, because you're competing with entire teams of people that are spending their full days trying to build these things. I mean, like at Operativa, this is a thing for us because we're ultimately a tooling company. You'll see our GitHub repo publicly is empty at the moment because we've already built some stuff. We're just not ready to put it out there yet. Soon, but JavaScript as an ecosystem is getting more mature because those apps that were on the bleeding edge for the last 10 years are now established 10-year-old projects, and the distribution of engineers in the space, like the center of the distribution is a lot more people with more than 5, 6, 7 years of experience. Not that those numbers mean too much, but they correlate with some things. So like the average JavaScript developer is becoming more experienced and more demanding of what needs to happen. It's becoming harder to compete because most of the low-hanging fruit has been taken out. And even when you compete, you're competing with marketing teams as well as engineers. Like it's super disheartening. Like trying to jump into the space, and then you've got little companies like ours in the middle who have some money to throw at these problems, but not like all the money, and trying to do a good thing, but not being able to release their stuff because because your name is tied to it, and sites like HN tend to get pretty flared when it comes to deficiencies in JavaScript implementation of things. As much as I love Hacker News, so yeah, like whoever this poster was brings up a good point. The bar has shifted. Time has moved on, and a lot of that discussion, if you look at that discussion on HN, is around like, yeah, it's because React 1, live with it, TTYL, kind of thing.
Don't at me.
don't at me. But it's not just React winning. It's I think out of everything I said, it's probably that in the common distribution, the average engineer is more experienced today than they were, and that the low hanging fruit has mostly been pulled off the tree.
Xander, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I think it's not really just about React winning. But I think we've started to understand kind of like what patterns work and what doesn't work. Like, so one of the things that often happens in any kind of creativity, and I think this is true. Yeah, okay. Convergence and divergence and convergence. Right. So this is what I wanted to talk about is whether you are personally problem solving or any kind of creative pursuit, you tend to have an initial period of divergence where you kind of like learn about and try different things and you cast a wider net, and then at some point you like you start to swing back this pendulum to convergence, where you now start settling on a particular approach or solutions. And this is true when you're doing a Google search. Like for me personally, unless I know exactly what I'm looking for, the first part of my search is like a little bit exploratory, and I'm trying to look for what is the jargon even like accurately describes the concepts in this problem that I'm trying to solve. And then once I know that, I'm able to get a lot more headway. So there's this kind of like, and it's a very, very common and well-known pattern. And I think perhaps to some degree that's happened with the current crop of JavaScript tools. I think there are also at a fundamental level some hard blockers to make more fundamental changes. One thing that I'd be very excited about is to be able to do effectively threading with shared memory that doesn't require you to like do array backed objects or that kind of thing. I think that would enable a lot of stuff. Personally, I'm a fan of functional programming, so I don't have to worry about data races if I use that kind of approach. But it would be really, really handy
Xandor.
if you can.
Functional programming?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Have you heard the good news? Have you heard the good news? So, but I mean, if you're using structural sharing and immutable data structures, it's very easy to make changes and like share them among different threads and parallelize work. And currently, like that's not something that can happen. Like there are some interesting experiments out there with using kind of like web workers based frameworks, but there's just this fundamental kind of like limitation where you either need to use array backed objects, or you need to use the structured clone algorithm, which honestly only makes sense if you genuinely have like a huge piece of work that like needs to go off and do its own thing, and it doesn't need access to the DOM and anything else. Because I'd love to be able to work with something where the main thread gets like conceptually renamed to the UI thread, right? And the only UI things should be happening there, and anything else should be happening elsewhere. Another thing that I think would be very interesting is like to have an architecture that is like fully kind of like streaming oriented, where everything is a stream. But until you can render into the DOM as in a streaming way, Like this is like you can do everything streaming, and then like right at the end, there's like DOM parser from
Angular
stream
devs crying in the background.
yeah. They removed. They had parse from stream like really long ago. Although I actually don't know if that ended up in being a rendered in a streaming way or not either. Because this is an interesting experiment. Like go and open a GitHub page, right? In fact, I wonder if I can get the com. Let's look for a project.
Sorry, like you've spoken for a bit, and there are just a couple of points that I want to touch on going back. So when you talk about this, like web worker based stuff, are we talking about things like Party Town, or are there specific frameworks that leverage this?
I am unfamiliar with Party Town.
It's a way to automatically shift tasks onto worker threads. If I remember right, it's been a long time since I looked at it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, but that was really for third-party scripts, though, wasn't it?
Okay. Well, either way,
it was like for your ads, so that your SEO score wouldn't.
Oh no, Next.js uses it under the hood, if I remember right. Or one of the meta frameworks uses it under the hood. I was quite impressed by it. So it's got a lot more utility than that. I think it actually comes from the guys at Builder.io. They really, really know their stuff. Yeah, it's using Next.js.
Yeah, so Party Town, Builder.io, web worker. Yeah. Okay.
So either way, so then the next point that I want to touch on, you were talking about these ideas of streaming and bringing functional, like, and that it is challenging. Like, is that because of the paradigm of the DOM, or because the paradigms within JavaScript that don't really support that sort of approach?
Well, so the DOM, yeah. So it's interesting because there's a streaming HTML renderer built into the browser. Like when you make a full page request and it gets HTML, it renders that as it gets the bytes, right? Like the thing, HTTP, TCP, it comes in little chunks, and like as soon as it has like something intelligible. No. So that's the thing. It only does that for like the raw HTML it gets. Like if you want to go and update the DOM based on some data that you have, like you want to do this dynamically, like client-side rendering, there is like no way currently to do that. The closest you can get, I think, is if you're sending like HTML partials and you use a web worker to do like an update or something. But like the point is, then you need to send HTML partials from the server.
Isn't that what Ajax is?
Well,
sorry.
Initially it was like that, right?
Dinosaur joke.
Initially it was like that, but so and for me it just feels like that from a performance perspective, like these things are like still not 100% like primitive and ergonomic and easy to use, and kind of like just the default way of like the pits of success kind of thing that you fall into. Even with React suspense and all this, you have to know how to opt into all of that functionality in order to make that happen. If you go and you create 1,000 DOM nodes at once and you're running React 18, it's still gonna like judder the browser. It doesn't go and like
speaking from experience, always.
Yeah. It doesn't go and render like bits of those DOM nodes first, and if there was some way to do streaming client side like dynamic rendering that was like a primitive that was built into the browser, like that would be very nice, I think.
Dan will make it happen for us. Dan Abramov will.
In Dan we trust.
Well, we'll do a talk about in like 3 years about like how browsers have actually evolved backwards, and and how the Meta team sent merge requests to Blink and to WebKit and Chrome and Firefox. What's Firefox's engine called again? Blazing Tiger, Spider Monkey.
Yeah,
was going to be called Servo.
Cool.
Then they axed that project.
I think we're very much in the weeds at this point.
Yeah, we are. It's because we ran out of
Okay.
things on our list.
Yes, we
Yeah.
ran out
So
of things on our list, so we
We
The
followed
last-
the plan this time.
yeah, I've added a little addendum here. I'm a big fan of the team behind Builder. I think they're doing some really interesting things, and I also like their open sourciness. They do some cool work, and we mentioned Party Town. I mentioned Quick. I forgot they actually both came out of the same house. They've also got mitosis, which is really interesting. It allows you to, for example, take a React component and turn it into a Vue component, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, I think that's everything that we are planning to discuss today. Does anyone have any closing notes for us?
Oh, yeah, well, there was some more stuff we wanted to chat about, which is not related to news, but like interesting experience with errors. I guess.
Yeah. Sorry, I totally forgot
So-
about that. Do you want to share your screen for some stuff?
So, yeah. Hold on.
You're welcome.
yeah.
There we go.
Tridactyl.
Whoops.
Yeah. By the way, if you like Vim key bindings and you use Firefox, like this is the best extension you could possibly want to grab or use or install. Okay. I'm creating a little custom error message here. And what's its stack? That's the last one. There's our stack. Okay, well, not that it's not really standard, but like you can use it, and then let's go toString. And since this is just
No,
for
would you
sake of
mind zooming in for
example-
us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Hold on. There we go. Okay. I actually don't really need the rest of the UI there, so we can do this. Is that big enough? Can people see?
Beautiful. Yeah, thanks so much. Even
Okay.
better.
This name. So, and then we've got message, and that is actually the default pretty much. But what if I also wanted to I don't know, JSON. What? That's lowercase. Stringify. Pause this, and then no stack. Stack as well. Okay, and then that. And is that the thing? Tell me this is valid. Yes. Okay, cool. So if I go var custom error equals new, and I go I don't know, just tests, right? And then I say, let's say I want to console log this. Log custom error. It doesn't use my toString method. Like, so can I expand this? This is what I expected to see, right? So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Well, like, why is it not doing that?
Why?
And why doesn't it do that? And then I think even more than that, if I go like string. Oh, right. So if I go string custom error, right? Then it does use my custom toString thing. But if I go JSON.stringify. Okay, there it did work. So I've had problems in the past where like it didn't actually JSON stringify the error correctly, or is that because what I did was error.prototype dot to JSON equals custom error. Sorry, I'm just copying the to.json method from the one to the other. And if I went now and console, nope, JSON.stringify, new plain error. I'll explain all of this just now. Okay, it does do it. All right. So with the JSON stringify, it's fine. But errors have this like hard-coded kind of like in somewhere in C++ in the browser itself, like way to display this. Like they go and they take the name and they take the message, and that is incidentally the exact same as the default toString implementation. But if I went and I said, you know what, error.prototype.toString is equal to my custom errors toString.
Can you just add a bunch of new lines? The code's under your name on the thing on the viewport.
No, Xandor Schaefer dot
oh.
to
right.
prototype
Okay, hold on.
is totally
Hold on,
valid
hold on.
syntax.
What I could do is maybe this. How's that?
Yeah, that works.
And then go like that. Okay, cool. Right. So if I go like this and I want to log a new error, right? Like console log new error test. Do you see how it didn't use this toString function to generate this string? Like that was the toString function from custom error, which was to like give all this extra data. So the project I've been working on, we report uncalled errors to the server because stuff is deployed at customers, and sometimes like we only get logs like months and months and months later, and we got to play exception archaeology to try and figure out like what actually happened. So the more details I have about when that exception was caught or thrown, the better. So one thing that error has is a cause thing. Like I can go new error 2, and then cause is new error 1. And if I do this, the console will actually be like, hey, error 2 came from here, and then it was caused by error 1, and that came from there. But I wanted to capture more detail than that. So in an API layer, for example, I want to capture the request, the response, the information that went into the generation of that request and everything else. And we wanted to be able to stringify that. And it turns out errors are special objects in so many ways. They're not like a normal class, and they don't behave the same way you want. And I ended up having to I created this whole thing that I might think about open sourcing at some point, like basically an error where you can add an arbitrary amount of context that is easily JSON stringifiable, and that will give you like nice error messages. And what I've done is that I've overwritten the message property into like a getter that, like, depending on whether you're in dev mode or not, will like give you all this extra context. And then after that, I found out that there's actually an API to create custom object formatters. So that in the console, any object you have, like you can decide how to actually render those in the console. There's like a whole kind of de facto standard for doing this. Chrome first implemented it. They use something called JSON-ML, which looks a lot like JSX, but it existed first, I think. And you can do stuff like this with that. Look at this. Look at this. This is mad. To be able to display stuff in the console that way. I mean, I don't want to necessarily do something pictorial, but I just like to be able to show extra properties when an error is thrown to the console. Because the problem is when you subclass error, it just displays it like any other error. So you can like toString all you want, and you can do JSON all you want, but like in the console, it's not going to be displayed properly. And you could wrap the console if you wanted, monkey patch it, and display your custom things that way. But then you lose kind of this stuff here on the right hand side where you can click on something and it like takes you to the line of code in the debugger, which it obviously doesn't here because, oh, hey, it does. I thought it wouldn't do that because it didn't come from a file, but whatever, right? Like you'd lose all of that kind of functionality. But yeah, so I found today I learned custom object formatters. And of course, there's cool projects like this where someone's like, hey, I made this thing so you can easily create like custom formatters using JSX.
Yeah, lol.
Yeah. So
Welcome
you can
to the jungle.
Yeah. Anyway, the only thing is you need to enable this in your DevTools. In Firefox, you go know exactly where, settings and enable custom formatters, right? And Chrome's got something similar.
Yeah.
You have to enable it by default. Turns out this has been used by like Immutable.js and the Closure Script dev tools and a whole bunch of things.
Fascinating.
But yeah, this was super hard to find. Like I searched the web for days for like ways of doing this, and never once did I come across custom object formatters until much later, by chance almost, it felt like. So yeah, in case anyone didn't know, this is the thing.
Today I learned. Well, I learned this the other day from you, but today I learned again. Cool. Thanks for that, Xandor. Mike, you are on mute.
You're muted.
The most common phrase that has been said over the last 3 years. Yeah, thanks so much for that. I definitely learned today, so really appreciate that, Xandor. But yeah, I think that is a great piece to close us off on after my failed attempt to finish. So yeah, thanks so much for joining, guys. It was a good one. Looking forward to hearing from Skulk again about his other one. And yeah, hopefully August has more interesting stuff in JavaScript land for us.
Right.
Thanks so much, peeps. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone. Have a lucky one.
Cheers.
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 Bye.